Hello, divine, messy humans. Amanda Kate here again, transformational life coach and kinesiologist. I wanted to come to you tonight about relationships. They are such a huge part of our lives, like crazy big, of course. Um, it isn't just our relationship with our children, our partners, our parents, those people close to us. It's also relationships with everyone who crosses our path. So I think when we talk relationships, people often don't see the bigger picture of what relationships are and how they turn up in our lives. But there was a massive realization I came to the other, oh gosh, it must have been a couple of years ago now. And that was that my people in my life that I love and I care about are not fucking mind readers. I know it feels crazy even saying that out loud, but how much of my communication with them doesn't come out of my mouth? How much of my communication is silent telepathy, really? I remember when I first started working with kinesiology and working with people who were going through complex trauma and all sorts of other things. I'd find the days were really long and really quite hard, which is understandable because we're working with some really big stuff. And I'd come home and I'd be grumpy and grouchy and snarly. Not only that, I was also going through a divorce at the time, which was pretty toxic, as anyone who's gone through a divorce tends to know, unless you're one of the lucky 1% who are consciously uncoupling. But I'd come home and I'd be snappy and snarly. I'd be tired and grumpy. And at some point, invariably, I would lose it at the kids, even though it wasn't anything to do with them. And all of a sudden, in clinic one day, I was like, oh my God, why not just come in and be open and honest about what I'm feeling and what's going on for me? And what I did in that moment, that next day when I walked through the door, I said to the kids, you know what? I've had a really long day in clinic. I'm probably going to need your help tonight. If you wouldn't mind, I may call on you for some extra jobs. And even in saying it, having those words fall out of my mouth, I felt a release of energy, a release of expectation on myself, an honesty that hadn't really been there in that way before. Now, going forward, it didn't always work. Sometimes I still would lose my shit. Sometimes the kids would push me, or sometimes just stuff would happen. But the interesting thing was that if I did get to a point where I'd lost my shit, invariably the kids would look at each other and sort of go, oh, well, she warned us. Now I deal with it in a slightly different way, but I found that a really good gateway into what I do now. But it still does come down to me communicating where I'm at. Nowadays, because my kids are older, I may serve them dinner, and during dinner, I will say, you know what, kids, after dinner, I'm heading upstairs. I'm going to have a bath. I'm going to read my book, and you won't see me again till morning. So say goodnight now. You guys do the dishes, tidy up. I don't want to come down to any of this mess in the morning. And it's actually quite nice that I have the freedom and flexibility to do that. And I think as your kids get older, it does make it easier. But it's still at the basis, it's the same. It's about communicating how we're feeling inside. If we've had a long day, if we're stressed, if we're tired, if we're, if we've had just shit go wrong, because it's life and it is fucking messy at times, we can allow ourselves to open up and be honest with those people who we're in relationship with. Think about it. How could that change your life? Being open and honest about where you're at when you come home. I read in a Brené Brown book, or maybe watched in one of her videos, whatever it was, I've heard her speak about it, that when her and her husband come home, because they're both super busy, he's a pediatrician, she's a researcher and a public speaker and director of a company and goodness knows what else. They both give a mark out of, I can't remember what it is, 10, 20, 100, doesn't actually really matter. Let's call it 100 because I can't quite remember the story. But in that, we have it's checking in with each other. Where are you at? Where am I at? Now, if they're both over 80%, it's something like they both go and cook dinner together and take care of all the jobs together because they've both got energy in the tank. If they're both at, say, 20% or under 40% or whatever it is, neither will do dinner and they get takeout. And if they're both around that middling mark, they kind of have a discussion about it. But having some kind of check-in system like that, or saying what I was saying with my kids, allows you to take some pressure off yourself and off everyone else in the house, because we're not expecting them to be mind readers about what our day was like, what our energy levels are, what our energetic capacity is, what our emotional capacity is. And of course, remember, this meat suit is only a tiny percentage of who and what we are. So taking it back a step and being open and honest with those people that we are in relationship with can be freaking game changing. Not only do we get to be on the same page, but it fosters connection between us because there is honesty, there is transparency, there is clarity, there's understanding. If I lose my shit because I'm exhausted and I've pre-warned my children, then they don't blame themselves for my shitty behavior, for my reactiveness, for my lack of resourcefulness. They are able to recognize it for the fact that it is a lack of resourcefulness. It is because I'm overstretched. It is because I'm overtired. So think about it in your relationships. How can you do this? How can you make yourself slightly more open, slightly more honest, slightly more vulnerable? How can you give a heads up to the people in your world? Sending you lots and lots of love. Keep